This is Service Games, The Rise and Fall of Sega. It's a book written by Sam Pettis, and it was originally set up through a Kickstarter campaign. It's sort of a history book, but you can't really read it in that manner because there's a lot of faults from like traditional history books that really make this not really that great in terms of sort of a reference guide. My major problem with it is it's not sourced very well. I did reach out to Sam, or at least the person who is running the Facebook page for this, and they do have a list of the sources. They were on a website at one point. The website has now been taken down. Some of the sources are in here. They're mostly in-text citations or they're in parenthetical citations. A lot of it seems to be from Sega Visions and from other interviews that were taken. I don't know if he did them, but they were taken from other sources and put in. That all being said, this is a good book. After I read it the first time, I didn't really like it that much. Upon a second reading, I was in a different mindset, not really looking at it as this is the history of Sega, more along the lines of this is what happened with the company and why it didn't really work out as from the hardware standpoint. That all being said, it starts off with the early days of Sega, starting from when they were an import-export company, going all the way up until the Dreamcast, and a little bit into the third-party era of Sega. I would say it seems a little unfocused to me because he doesn't really use anything to drive the story forward. I would have probably framed it around on sort of like the before Sonic era and then the Sonic era if I was doing it. But he doesn't really follow that. He sort of goes in order from system to system, explaining sort of the games that went with the systems, a little bit of the marketing that goes behind them, and Sam spends a lot of time talking about the hardware specs of the system. Me personally, I didn't find that all that interesting. I'm not really a hardware guy. I just want to know if the games are good. I just want to know if they look decent on the system at the time. There are some other things in this that I didn't really like. Their use of pictures in the book don't really work for me most of the time. Usually in a book like this, you want to use a picture to drive home a point or add on to the story when you're writing a history book. There are a lot of pictures, and a lot of them don't need to be in the book. There are half-page images of just the Microsoft logo. That doesn't really add anything to me. But, sometimes they do work out very well. Seeing sort of the prototype for the Bandai Sega logo, that was kind of interesting. Seeing some of the development boards, again, that didn't really mean anything to me. It might mean something to more of a hardware person. There are a few instances where I'm not sure that it was researched very well. Some of the specifically the way in which they say that Sonic was created in this book it feels like something's missing. He doesn't really talk about the contest that was launched through with the Sega employees to come up with a mascot, and I don't really remember a lot of the redesign of the US from going from the way Sonic looks in Japan to the way Sonic looks in the US being talked about. It's about a 400-page book, so there's a very good chance that I missed it. He does go very lengthy into the sort of the attempt to make Sonic Extreme for the Sega Saturn, which was really cool for me because I didn't really know that Sonic Extreme was being made. I didn't follow the Saturn when it was out, and I really hadn't heard of the game until probably a few years ago. and seeing the description for that, it was really, really great. I wanted to actually know more, however, there's it's not really sourced very well, so I would have to go out and do the research on my own and come back to it. Um, there are a few things that I would have done differently in this if I was writing this book. Uh, for one thing, I would have probably focused it more on Sonic-driven story, sort of used Sonic as a way to drive the narrative forward after sort of after the 1990s. Prior to that, I would have done a lot of the arcade stuff if I had been, again, if I had written this. That being said, I really hope that Sam writes another one of these, like maybe revisits a specific part of it. Because you can see, when you read the book, you can see how much effort went into making this book. I think they really, really tried hard to do this, and they may have tried to shove too much into the book. They probably could have used a little more time to maybe go through it a little more, figure out things that don't quite work with the way they're telling the story. But I think overall, if you want to know more about Sega, if you want to know more about the history of it, this is a good way to start. It'll give you a great launching pad to sort of learn more about the company and everything like that. But yeah, there's not really much more I have to say. Sam and the other people that put this together, they did a really good job. I don't know if Sam had written anything before this. I don't know if he's written anything since this. But I really hope that they do attempt to make another one of these. Maybe focus it a little bit more narrow. Maybe focus on just maybe just on the Master System, or maybe on the Genesis, or one of the other systems that Sega has done. Or maybe focus on their third-party years following the Dreamcast, the Dreamcast kind of failure. That being said, some other things I learned from this. I didn't know how popular Sega was in Europe at the time, mostly because when I was playing the Genesis, I didn't think about anything outside of how much fun I was having playing it. I did know about the Mega Drive. I did not know about the three systems prior to the Mega Drive, and that was kind of new to me, and sort of learning some of the different things about that. I never really thought about Sega's arcade hits prior to starting to really read history about Sega and learning some of the different things about their arcades. That was kind of interesting to me in this book. I think that's pretty much it. Oh, and the different sort of the different ways of thinking between Sega of Japan, Sega of America, and Sega of Europe. That was really interesting. It seemed like Sega of Europe and Sega of America, at least from reading this book, were their line of thinking was closer to each other than that of Japan. It seemed like, and this is true, there was a lot of conflict between the way the management of Sega of Japan and then the management of Sega of America. America was very different in the way they sort of wanted different things. I hadn't really heard too much about Sega of Europe until really reading this book, and I would like to actually know more about that. I really wish this had all of its sources in it, 'cause that really would have made my day. I am a trained historian, and I really would like to learn more about this stuff.